What does God look like? I've been saying it for a long time, but the future of horror is indie. While it's true that every once in a while a major studio or developer will put out a good film or game, I find more often than not that the horror I really love, that sticks with me and makes it into videos like these, is by much smaller teams working with less resources than those more established creative teams. You need only look at YouTube to see this point proven. The rise of analog horror in recent years can be attributed to projects made primarily by individual creators, which have garnered huge amounts of support and fandom. Creepypasta narrations have been a staple of the internet horror genre for as long as I can remember on this site, and of course, creators like myself and my much more popular counterparts tend to go out of their way to bring attention to projects and stories we like the Magnus Archives or the Magnus Protocol. Did it again. A really fascinating side of the YouTube horror sphere, in my opinion, is the short film side. You've probably seen a couple, or at least their thumbnails. Now, typically, these films are produced by more than just one person. It would be hard not to, especially when your script calls for multiple actors, but they're still produced with a much smaller budget and with less available resources than what a major studio would be able to provide. In fact, I found that most of these projects are either by aspiring filmmakers taking university courses or entries into indie film competitions or festivals. The piece of horror I'd like to discuss tonight is one of these short films, and if you're at all interested in this side of the YouTube horror space, then you've almost certainly seen this film before. I get comments about it frequently and see it held up as not just one of the best pieces of indie horror or internet horror, but simply horror in general. With just 7.5 minutes of content, this film has managed to get tons of attention, raking in 7.5 million views. I've seen articles about it, snippets of it made into popular Instagram reels, other YouTubers praising or theorizing about it, and I figure it's my turn to share my thoughts about it. This film, posted by Dylan Clark in the summer of 2022, is called Portrait of God. I've watched it a couple of times before I was even making videos regularly. It's an incredible film, especially considering its limitations, with a great lead actress and a thoughtful score. But the one thing this film really understands is the film opens on the quote, "No man shall see me and live," Exodus 33:20. This is obviously a Bible passage from the second book in the Bible, Exodus. You may notice that the word "me" is capitalized. The reason for this, which I'm sure many of you already know, is because it is God himself who is delivering this line, specifically to Moses, and in the Bible all pronouns referring to God are capitalized as a form of respect and reverence. Like many passages from the Bible, which have been translated multiple times over the years from its original language of Hebrew, the meaning behind this passage has been debated, but the most popular interpretation simply is that God is so great, or potentially infinite, that the sinful human form cannot bear to stand in its presence, and that doing so will result in perishing. Think of the ending of Raiders of the Lost Ark. As a person who comes from a Christian background and who also spent a lot of his childhood becoming acquainted with the works of H.P. Lovecraft and those who emulated his works afterwards, I've always thought that there was an obvious cosmic element to certain stories and ideas from the Bible. A focus on the unfathomable, places that are beyond human description, entities that are beyond human understanding, awesome acts of creation and destruction enacted with incomprehensible motives. These descriptors fit both a classic Lovecraftian story and an even more classic Bible story. If you need further proof of this, look to the biblically accurate angels meme trend, a trend that somewhat misses the nuance of the hierarchy of angels, but that does draw attention to the terrifying and alien makeups of some of these beings. What the film is doing by introducing itself with this quote is recontextualizing this already ominous concept in a way that appears potentially more sinister. We know we're watching a horror movie, and we know it's got to be at least partially related to God, so we're immediately prompted to think, we must be about to see God in this film, or at least a portrait of him, and this must result in something terrible. This quote is eventually covered by a lowering projector screen, and we find ourselves in a dark classroom, where it appears that a young woman, probably Mia Riley, is practicing some sort of presentation that shares the film's name. She starts a timer on her phone, prepares her notes, and begins her speech with a question. What does God look like? She continues and says she's going to show us a photo of a painting, which she urges her hypothetical audience to take a moment to stare at. When she flips to the next slide, it appears to be completely empty, black. As we stare desperately at the painting, trying to make something, anything out, the darkness begins to work its magic on us. She acknowledges this blackness, but tells us that that's not what everyone sees. Apparently, this painting is also known as the Portrait of God, and some people swear that they can see a person in the darkness, staring at them. As she delivers this line, the camera cuts to a shot of her behind a computer screen in a dark classroom. An interesting connection is formed through her monologue and the makeup of these shots. After hearing that some people recognize a figure in this dark painting, we're subconsciously motivated to look harder at the darkness of this painting, try to make out the alleged figure. But similarly, when the camera cuts to Mia behind the screen, our eyes can't help but linger on the other dark parts in the classroom, wondering if indeed a figure could be hidden in that blackness as well, just out of sight. There's a window behind Mia, possibly to the projection room, and a hard-to-recognize shape is peeking out from behind the large object blocking the rest of this window. This could obviously be something innocuous, like the back of a rolling chair, but we've already been prompted to extrapolate figures from nothing. So it's possible that you might see this as someone's head, watching the presentation quietly behind Mia. Whatever the case, we're put on edge by an empty painting and just a few lines of dialogue. Mia plays an audio clip of several unknown people describing the figure they apparently see in the painting. It's a man, or close to a man. Wrinkled, skinny, smiling. The smile is described differently by different people, like it's smudged, or a mask, or too wide. His eyes also get some attention from this collection of speakers. They're big, looking down at us with a glint in them, a speckle of light. This collection of descriptions paints a picture in our minds, one that is probably unique to each of us, based on our fears and our comprehensions of these descriptions. And when the camera cuts back to Mia watching the screen, 2 pinpricks of light are hovering behind her. We haven't seen them before, we're sure of it, and they're spaced just so that we can't help but think of those as eyes, with that glint. All the while, the descriptions of this figure become more and more unsettling, calling it powerful, frightening. One woman says she doesn't like looking at it, but it's beautiful. Mia's voice, louder than the rest, continues its speech, and we still see those pricks of light hovering behind her as she says, maybe it's just a trick of the light. Maybe they're just seeing something they want to see. Clearly referencing those audio clips, but almost seeming to be responding directly to our concerns about the lights behind her. What if they are just regular parts of the environment, like the other lights around her? What if we're seeing eyes because we've been prompted to, because we want to see them as eyes? But then again, Mia calls doubts to her own words, and wonders if these people indeed are having a religious experience while viewing this painting, thumbing the cross around her neck as she considers this. She asks, why does God appear to them and not us? The shot briefly cuts back to the screen, which now holds the text, why can they see him? And when the shot cuts back to Mia, the pinpricks, which we really can't stop thinking of as eyes, are gone. Why can't we see them? Clearly having reached the end of her speech, or at least the portion of it she's practicing, Mia stops the timer on her phone and cycles back through her presentation's few slides. We only see the slide with the painting for a moment, but in that brief moment, there's something there. It's barely perceptible, little more than a smudge, but we can see something that we definitely didn't see before. Most noticeably, 2 small pinpricks of light. Mia begins her speech again. What does God look like? I'm going to show you a painting, or rather, a photograph of a painting. Just take a moment to stare at it. And she goes to the next slide. Just like the first time, there's nothing there. We strain our eyes, desperate to find whatever it was we glimpsed while she was resetting, but it's not there. Not to us. But Mia pauses, staring up at the screen, still messing with the cross around her neck, an unsettling musical sting of female vocals beginning to play quietly. What does she see? What's interrupted her practice, a practice that's clearly timed? What do you see? She mutters absent-mindedly. And as we stare at the darkness with her, we can almost start to make something out, one of those pinpricks. We linger on it and watch Mia's face as something comes over her. She stands, and when we look back, there's definitely something there. Has it always been there, looking back at us, and we just didn't notice? Or is something revealing itself to us? We can almost make out a form, the smudge becoming a curved back or something like it. Mia is smiling at the screen. The longer we look, the clearer it becomes. We can start to make out other pieces of its form, the shape of its face, staring down at us while Mia looks up. She suddenly seems to come to her senses and raises the screen, the projector still glowing behind her. The canvas upon which this spine-backed mystery is housed begins to recede, and she stares as it does, transfixed, willing the figure to disappear with the screen. It may be an illusion caused by the rippling fabric, but the creature almost seems to twitch with anticipation as we realize the raised screen has not erased the creature. It lingers in the dark, Mia breathing heavily. All is still, and the creature moves. Mia runs out of the room to safety, but as the door closes behind her, she finds herself in a new kind of darkness, a deeper black than the simple empty lecture hall. She is dwarfed by it, lost in it. She looks around terrified and confused until she's stopped in her tracks by a sound, a dripping, a breathing. She turns slowly to see two pinpricks swaying, almost like they would as if someone tall was walking towards you. As she walks slowly backwards, still silent, leaving this ethereal spotlight, the thing gets closer, its form beginning to materialize in the light. She turns away, chooses not to see the thing that approaches her, falling into prayer as she clutches her necklace. She chooses not to look, but we do. The blurry form of something walks towards her. Is this meant to be God? How could it be? What does it want? Why is it here? Where even is here? Are we in the darkness of the painting? A hand turns Mia's face towards the horrifying mystery. She keeps her eyes shut, tight as it does, a tear dripping down her cheek as the blurry form gets closer but never comes fully into focus. It's pale, gaunt. Its eyes are dark pits, and its smile, what we can see of it at least, is warped, too big, just like they were saying. It reaches into its mouth and drags it down, a gaping, impossible maw. From this maw emanates a sudden glowing, a bright bulb of light, and when Mia finally opens her eyes to see it, she appears immediately calmed. Her eyes take on that same shining light, a light that resembles that of the projector, and suddenly we're back. Mia still staring up at the screen. It's like she never moved, that everything she'd just seen was in her head somehow. Her eyes are red and teary, pupils massive. She may not have even blinked. Her expression is near impossible to read, and the light of the projector resembles now a halo above her head. Did this encounter with God, if that's what we want to call the thing, make her holy? What did it do to her? Her hand bleeds. She's clutched at the cross over her heart too tightly, staining her white shirt with streaks of red. The timer of her phone tells us she's been there for hours, just staring, bleeding, seeing. The screen is empty. She smiles. This film does so many things well. It's subtle and yet pronounced, left open to interpretation, and manages to do more in 7 minutes than many films manage to accomplish in an hour and a half of runtime. I have to give credit to Sydney Brumfield, the actress who portrays Mia, as her acting, and specifically her facial acting, do so much for the tone of this piece. We can really feel her confusion, fear, and finally hypnotized acceptance throughout this film. And because she's often reacting to something we can't see or can only partially make out, these reactions are really valuable for letting our imaginations run free, something that I obviously appreciate. In the making of video, Dylan describes how budgetary constraints and a knowledge of his own limited resources guided him towards making the film he did. He was able to craft his idea around that understanding, which makes sense. It's infinitely harder to write something and later realize you won't be able to realize it in the way you'd like and adjust, than to write something knowing you'll be able to make it. This may sound like bad advice, that you should always shoot for the stars, but I think the real lesson here is that you don't need a huge budget to make something that people will respond to. You just need enough awareness and talent to take advantage of what you do have. And what this film has is a great concept, a great actress, and a great execution. Dylan makes it clear that the base inspiration behind this piece is playing around with darkness, and how interesting it is that depending on how good someone's eyesight is or how much attention they're paying, they see different things in different amounts during those dark scenes, referencing movies like Hereditary. It's really interesting seeing how the creature was produced for this. It's actually just the director without a shirt and a mask with some light visual effects thrown on top. It's a pretty effective design, but clearly what makes it so much more effective is keeping it out of focus the whole time. You see enough of it to produce an image in your head, but it's just hidden enough that the image is shaky and abstract and that much more unsettling. Dylan clearly understands the less is more strategy of filmmaking. There was apparently a lot more to the lore of this non-existent painting initially, but Dylan realized how effective it was to just focus on the meat of the painting, the emptiness of it, and people's reactions to it. I really love this film. I love how unique it is, how it sticks in your mind, and how much thought and care clearly went into its production. Like I said earlier, the entire team behind this has managed to do so much in just 7 minutes, and I'm really excited to see more of their work in the future. We have to support artists like this, especially now, in a time when things like AI and greed are diluting the genre with low-effort, heartless productions. If you take away anything from this video, let it be that. And also, to keep an eye on that dark spot in the corner. Something might be looking back.